Good evening, friends. We continue our reading of Job tonight. We're at an interesting moment, depending on what system of chapter and verse numbering you go with. We are either at the end of chapter 2 or the beginning of chapter 3. Chapters and verses don't always match up, especially between Jewish biblical tradition and Christian biblical tradition. I'll say more about that in a moment. But here we are in Job. And so let's start by looking at the big picture of Job, as we always do. We are in the section now of Job and the friends, in this big middle section that is by far the longest section of Job. A very interesting portion where there's this back and forth. We've already read about these friends who have heard about what Job is suffering, enduring, and so they come to be with him. And for 7 days they sit in silence. And then the silence is broken and they begin to respond. And let's just say this right up front. They're not exactly the most helpful. With friends like these, Job most certainly does not need enemies. They're not really that supportive. They're certainly not empathetic. They're pretty judgmental. They're pretty harsh. And maybe it's easy for us to say that because we have had the gift of knowing Job's character as described by God in the first 2 chapters. Job is undeniably a man of righteousness, a godly man, a man who is right before God, a man who has the grounds on which to stand in the midst of his suffering. Here's the reading windows. I'll be reading primarily from the left-hand column, which is the complete Jewish Bible, obviously a Jewish Bible. The right-hand column contains the text as it is found in a Christian Bible, specifically the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition. And I may reference that from time to time. Primarily, I'll reference that to bring us up to an awareness of things that don't quite sound familiar from Jewish biblical language. Because Jewish biblical language and Christian biblical language don't always use the same words or names for persons, places, and even things. There is definitely a distinction. The most obvious one we'll start with is Yov is Job. I said at the very beginning, we are either at the end of chapter 2 or the beginning of chapter 3, depending on how you keep the chapters and verses. The first verse that we'll read tonight in the Jewish biblical tradition is the last verse of chapter 2. In the Christian Bible, biblical chapter and verse numberings, it's the first verse of chapter 3. So, with that in mind, friends, we begin our reading, mindful of the fact that we are early in the story of Job and his friends who have now arrived. Let's scroll down and get to our starting point. At length, Eof broke the silence and cursed the day of his birth. Eof said, "Perish the day I was born, and the night that said a man is conceived. May that day be darkness, may God on high not seek it, may no light shine on it. May gloom dark as death defile it, may clouds settle on it, may it be terrified by its own blackness. As for that night, may thick darkness seize it. May it not be joined to the days of the year, may it not be numbered among the months. May that night be desolate. May no cry of joy be heard in it. May those who curse days curse it, those whose curses could rouse Leviathan. May the stars of its twilight be dark. May it look for light but get none. May it never see the shimmer of dawn, because it didn't shut the doors of the womb I was in and shield my eyes from trouble. If I had been stillborn, if I had died at birth, had there been no knees to receive me or breasts for me to suck, then I would be lying still and in peace. I would have slept and been at rest, along with kings and their earthly advisers who rebuilt ruins for themselves, or with princes who had plenty of gold, who filled their houses with silver. Or had I been like a hidden, miscarried child that never saw light? There the wicked cease their raging, there the weary are at rest. Prisoners live at peace together without hearing a taskmaster's yells. Great and small alike are there, and the slave is free of his master. So why must light be given to the miserable and life to the bitter in spirit? They long for death, but it never comes. They search for it more than for buried treasure. When at last they find the grave, they are so happy they shout for joy. Why give light to a man who wanders blindly, whom God shuts in on every side? My sighing serves in place of my food, and my groans pour out in a torrent. For the thing I feared has overwhelmed me. What I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quiet, no rest, and anguish keeps coming. Job becomes silent, and the first of the friends responds. Then Eliphaz the Temanite, spoke up. If one tries to speak to you, will you mind? Yet who could keep from speaking? You have given moral instruction to many. You have firmed up feeble hands. Your words have supported those who were stumbling, and you have strengthened the weak-kneed. But now it comes to you, and you are impatient. At the first touch, you are in shock. Isn't your fear of God your assurance, and the integrity of your ways your hope? Think back. What innocent person has perished? Since when are the upright destroyed? What I see is that those who plow sin and sow trouble reap just that. At a breath from God they perish. At a blast from his anger they are consumed. The lion may growl, the lion may roar, but that old lion's teeth are broken. So the lion succumbs from lack of prey, and the lion's cubs are scattered. For a word was stealthily brought to me. My ear caught only a whisper of it. In passing thoughts, flashing through visions at night, when sleep lies heavy on people, a shiver of horror came over me. It made all my bones tremble. Then a spirit passed in front of my face. The hair of my flesh stood on end. I stood still, but I couldn't make out its appearance. Yet the form stayed there before my eyes. Then I heard a subdued voice. Can a human be seen by God as righteous? Can a mortal be pure before his Maker? God doesn't trust his own servants. He finds fault even with his angels. Much more those living in houses of clay whose foundation is in the dust. They are crushed more easily than a worm, shattered between morning and evening. They perish forever, and no one takes notice. Their cord within them is pulled up. Then they die, without ever gaining wisdom. Call if you like, but will anyone answer? To which of the holy ones will you turn? For anger kills the fool, and envy slays the silly. I watch as a fool establishes roots, but I curse his home with sudden destruction. His children are far from help, publicly humiliated, with no one to rescue. The hungry eat up his harvest, taking it even from among thorns, while the thirsty are panting, eager to swallow his wealth. From misery does not come, for misery does not come from the dust, or trouble spring from the ground. No, people are born for trouble, as surely as sparks fly upward. We'll pause there, friends. And next time we'll pick up here at verse 8. Good evening, Anthony. Have a blessed evening, dear friends. May Christ's peace be with you, to remain with you always.